Let's
that I tweeted we were going to do. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. Do you want to just go straight to Chuck Todd? So
let's get it out of the way. Yeah, let's get it out of the way.
Is Chuck Todd fix? Okay.
I've got plenty of media bias, by the way, to bring to you that doesn't include Chuck Todd. But I'm sure you want to go all the way back in time to last week.
Have I ever suggested that he is the only media bias that's out there?
No, but he just happens to be a favorite of yours.
He is. He is a favorite of mine because I do think he disguises it fairly well. But his media bias is as great as anybody on air, in my opinion. But I think he disguised it. So, fortunately, you, Generalissimo,
yes,
you transcribed Chuck Todd's appearance on the HughHewitt show last week.
I did indeed.
And so I wish to read a couple of things first, and then we'll go on to I'm going to put on my glasses so that I make sure.
You're going to show your age.
I'm on Medicare in 2 months. Did you know that?
With those glasses, you look like you're on Medicare in 2 months.
There you go. So anyway, I finally get something back from the government that I paid into them. We'll see how it goes. All right. So here's what Chuck Todd said in answer to the question about how Hugh says he has one standard on these sexual harassment, whatever things for everyone. To which Chuck Todd said, yeah, look, it is. We've done our due diligence as a news organization, right? We've tried to surface all the information we can find out. If we can even have a better idea, if her story can get corroborated, and we haven't been able to corroborate it. But you can't disprove it either. Now there's the first thing.
Yeah.
So there's 4 or 5 other people who corroborated that story on the Joe Biden accuser, whereas the Kavanaugh accuser had how many either contemporaneous or later corroborations? 0. Well,
none.
We now know absolutely 0. Several that turned out to be actually fraudulent. He goes on to say, you're stuck in one of these. Ultimately, is you surface what you can. There's clearly a campaign component to this, whether it's people that are Sanders supporters or people that are Trump supporters, right? There's an aspect to that. So what's he saying? He's saying that this is being brought up because there aren't Trump supporters. The Tara Reade and all the people who've come out all voted for Hillary, all said they will not vote for Trump next time. They dislike Trump. But this, in fact, happened. So what's he suggesting? That they're Bernie supporters and that any motivation here is political. So, and then he goes on to say later, in answer to another question, I think the reason this story is getting more attention is that there's a campaign to try and make the press own this story, to make this a media story. That's what really I think the right is more into, at least the Trump's world, when I say the right. I don't mean the honest conservative right. I wonder if he thinks there's 3 people in that, 6 people in that. Is the honest conservative right to him the right that actually agrees with the left on things? And so that makes them, that's most of the time when people on the left say that, that's what they mean. But he says not the honest conservative right. I mean the sort of agitators, which is Trump people. They're agitators. So what do we get from Chuck Todd speaking about Tara Reade and the accusations against Joe Biden? That they have looked into it and determined it cannot be corroborated, so therefore it's not really a story. And the only reason it's out there is because if not Trump supporters putting it forward, it's Bernie support, just people who want to hurt Joe Biden. That's clearly the motivation, not
right.
that anything actually occurred. And now they're just trying to make it the agitators who are the Trump supporters are trying to make it a media story and make the media look bad because of how they handled Kavanaugh. Well, interesting. So I went on Bing and DuckDuckGo because I will never, ever use Google, which I think is a monopoly and should be broken up. And I did, and I thought that when I was in Congress and said so, which got me visits from Google's lobbyists. But anyway, yeah, I still think that they were going to break General Motors up in the '60s for having 60% market share. Google has 85% market share of a very important part of the economy. I mean, we broke up AT&T. We've broken up companies for fractions of that market share. Google needs to be broken up. But, okay, so I looked up a few things, and I'm sure a lot of what was out there you can't even find anymore. But here's a thing about NBC News in front of a packed audience at the Betts Theater. Not quite sure where that was or where that is. Todd opened the event, and this is about Kavanaugh hearings. So this is during Kavanaugh. Todd opened the event with a lengthy conversation about Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, which have recently included decades-old accusations of sexual assault from 2 women. He said that after the prolonged nomination fight, human nature would impart Kavanaugh with a bias against Democrats or the desire to lay low as an associate justice. Quote, I think now it's impossible for him to serve on the court in a fair way, unquote, Todd said. Interesting. Did we see anything about, because of this accusation, him suggesting that it was going to impact Biden's operation as president? Did you hear that?
Where no, I did not. Where I think he is right is he said that the majority of the right, the pro-Trump people, their interest in the story is making it a media story.
That's because it is a media story.
And that's because he's absolutely right. It is. Now, I would also say that I'm not that callous that I don't care about Tara Reade's allegations or that I care about Christina Blasey Ford's allegations. I think everybody should have an opportunity to share what they feel happened to them, and if it turns out that there's some corroboration and that person seems to be a creep, they should get out. I don't care what letter's behind their name. I want them all to get out.
Okay, I get it. I understand. I agree. And the media won't cover it because of the reasons Chuck Todd just said.
Yes.
If the media would cover this, just cover it, even if they came and said they didn't believe them or whatever. But if they just covered it in anywhere close to the same fashion in which they covered incessantly,
I think Joe Biden would wilt.
Then it wouldn't be a media story. It's a media story because the media made it a story. Let me go on. Todd said confirming Kavanaugh would set a bad precedent, sending a message to young men that it's okay to use the excuse, quote, boys will be boys. Has he suggested that it would be a bad precedent to elect Joe Biden because it would send a bad message?
Did you see the news of who was serving on Joe Biden's council on how to vet possible VP nominees?
No.
There's 4 people on it. One of the 4 that he tapped to give him advice and help vet the possible female VP nominee is none other than former Connecticut Senator Chris Waitress Sandwich Dodd.
Yes, very, very, very good. Okay, I have more on Chuck Todd back in.
I'm sure you do.
This is actually from Salon.
Okay.
Salon is not a conservative publication.
It is not.
Okay. NBC host Chuck Todd expressed doubt Tuesday that the Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh was telling the truth when he denied being at a party where he had allegedly sexually assaulted a woman. In an interview with the Washington Post, Christine Blasey Ford recalled that Kavanaugh pinned her and groped her at a party while both were in high school. The Post reported the party occurred in the early 80s, but it did not reveal specifications. Kavanaugh later categorically denied assaulting Ford or even attending the party. Quote Chuck Todd, the problem with the denial is that by Kavanaugh. The problem with the denial is that Dr. Ford didn't make a specific allegation of a specific event, unquote. Todd explained to MSNBC's Hallie Jackson on Tuesday. Quote, she admitted she couldn't remember which house this was. So why does he have a very specific ability to deny, unquote? Quote, more Chuck Todd. The point is, it seemed to raise more questions, perhaps the specific denial. There's a lot of people that could come out and have different remembrances here. And that's why I think every day you should judge this nomination on a day-to-day event is the bottom line. Okay? So
right.
he specifically said he does not believe Kavanaugh's denial, and he doesn't believe it because he said he didn't do it, and her accusation wasn't specific, and his denial, he says, was. Now then, let's go on. This is from The Hill back then, quoting Chuck Todd, quote, this one, talking about this allegation, because we're so close to an election, because of the Donald Trump era, this one feels like a tinderbox. It feels like 4 sticks of dynamite wrapped in radioactive material. Todd said, while making a statement here, and he goes on to say, quote, it just seems that either side could see an eruption of the culture that defines the rest of the midterm election in 6 weeks that could totally scramble what outcomes there could be. He later added that he wouldn't be surprised if Kavanaugh withdrew his nomination. And he went on to say that if he became a member of the Supreme Court, he would, quote, always be clouded by these accusations. Tell me, Generalissimo, where in this interview with HughHewitt or in anything that Chuck Todd has said on air since this Biden stuff came out several weeks ago, has he said anything remotely close to what he said about Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford?
The two statements are inconsistent. What I will tell you is that the reason Hugh wanted to put that interview out there is because he got Chuck Todd to lay down a marker, meaning whatever the standard was, the standard now is that there has to be a lot more corroboration to the story before they would run with it. And that would presume to say that the next time a Republican gets accused of something, theoretically, that marker is going to be pointed to.
Yeah, and I just don't think that's going to happen. I think there's already a marker, which is the way they treated Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey, whatever her name was, Ford. And that what Hugh should do.
You could say this. You could say the same thing about Clarence Thomas. I mean, there's plenty of markers back there.
Oh, I know, but I'm bringing Chuck Todd's words back to Chuck Todd.
I understand
specifically, and I'm sure he had words on Clarence Thomas too. But that's so far back.
He was probably with Hotline, not even NBC News at that time. My guess is he may not have had anything to say about Clarence Thomas.
I mean, Hugh on Thursday should ask him and say, why did you say this about this and not about the other? Now, what he'll say, because I believe that these media people like him are just lying, disingenuous, terrible people. He'll just say, well, there was plenty of evidence in that other case. I believe her accusations were credible, and I believe the Joe Biden accusations were. I believe every accusation against a Democrat is not credible. And I believe every accusation against a Republican is. Now, they wouldn't say that. They would take out the Democrat and Republican. But that is what, in fact, they do. And they will use all kinds of other reasons to do it. But that is what they will do.
And where I think I would disagree with you is
the next time there's an accuser of a Republican, he will say it's different.
Of course,
he will be on it 24/7.
They will, right?
And he will say that the Republican is lying. Absolutely, and say that NBC News has vetted it, and they have found proof that the Republican is lying, and that's what they'll say.
That said,
they're lying sleazeballs.
Now, where we would disagree is where you see lying sleazeballs. I see TDS to the point that it clouds their ability to do their job anymore. I don't know if it's pernicious evil like you think it is. It's just TD. It's a disease just like alcoholism is. It's TDS, and they need therapy.
Well, and you may be right about that. There's no question that the
because I got a whole laundry list of people that have the same disease.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not suggesting at all that he's the only one, but he's the one with which those of us who listen to the HughHewitt show every week are most familiar. But I think there's no question that the media has gotten worse in the Trump era, and you can call it TDS, and I understand TDS, and I know people who genuinely have it. I mean, whose lives, just regular out
the
there. The
Pulitzer Prize Board is systemically as TDS. You saw what they awarded the Pulitzer Prize to, right? The stupid 1619 project from the New York Times. That was so debunked, the New York Times had to issue clarifications for weeks, and it still was a debunked story. But it won the Pulitzer because it was.
Is it TDS, or is it just that Trump has not lain down for the media the way the rest of us, myself included, generally have? I fought them more than most, but I didn't fight them like Trump has. And
that's a fair question, and that's a question I've been wrestling with too, that I was actually going to ask you, which is, you certainly remember the period in time in which we had the George W. Bush administration. Now, how did the press treat George W. Bush? What would they call him? What did they think about him? How were
terribly? But
they called him Hitler.
Out.
They called him a Nazi. They thought he was stupid. They thought people had to read to him. They thought Dick Cheney did all the presidential work for him, that he was just a stupid oaf, right?
Well, so you're making my point, is that it's not just TDS. It existed back under Bush.
No,
I will never forget, before that, back when I was in the California Assembly and the Los Angeles Times, when there was Democrat Gray Davis and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and when Gray Davis was governor,
yes,
I would propose alternatives to things he did, and the LA Times would never run them. And I said, well, why didn't you run them? And they said, well, because you Republicans aren't in charge, and so you're not making policy. The governor is, so we just cover what he's doing. Okay, fine. Then things switch. Arnold Schwarzenegger's in charge, and now we're making policy. And they still didn't run our views on issues and points. They ran the Democrats' views. So I asked the same editor at the Los Angeles Times, why are you now only running the Democrats' views and ours? And they said, well, because you guys are in charge now, we have to present the Democrats because it presents an alternative viewpoint. And it's important to show the alternative viewpoint.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
Correct. And so this is what I mean. This is why I'm so thoroughly disgusted.
Except you didn't let me finish my premise. Okay, so we know how they treated George W. Bush, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now that they've had 3.5 years of Trump, they look back at, well, at least George W. Bush didn't do this. And boy, it would be nice if we had to have a Republican. At least maybe we should have George W. Bush here, because he would have handled things a lot more diplomatically. They're looking back fondly at the George W. Bush administration, right? Now, for it not to be TDS, for it to be just the opposition to the Republican of the day, for your theory, in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, whenever it is that we have the next Republican president, whenever that is, will the media then look back at Donald Trump and say he wasn't so bad by comparison? I don't think they will ever. And the reason why is because they have TDS. If they didn't have TDS, then they would look back fondly at Trump compared to the current evil, which is whatever Republican is in charge. Do you see the point I'm trying to make?
Yes, and I don't disagree with that point. But let's just say that the next Republican president, to make it kind of bookends with what you just said, was Jeb Bush.
Yes.
Let's just say that was the next Republican president. Is he going to fight back the media the way Donald Trump did?
Oh, crud, no.
Of course not.
But they're still going to demonize him.
Absolutely. That's my point, is that this kind of two-faced, disingenuous, lying stuff that the press does all the time in order to advance the left that they so badly want is. But
would they go after a proposed Bush presidency with this, or Jeb Bush presidency, with the same white-hot intensity and hatred that they do of Donald Trump now? I don't think it's possible. I don't think they could be any more over the top than they are right now against Trump. I don't think it's possible.
I actually think they might, because since they wouldn't get pushed back on as hard, that might encourage them to be even worse. They might think they can ruffle him. They might think they can get him out of office. They might think they can do different things like that. And you saw the criticism that came down when Trump and the media went just berserk when Trump in the Lincoln Memorial said that he had been more attacked by the press.
And that was so. I even tweeted on that. I called out a CNN reporter, and I called out a couple of the bigs on that because they intentionally left out. I called out Phil Rucker, the Washington Post, on this, and he's a frequent guest on the show too. Phil Rucker said the president compared himself to being treated just as bad as Lincoln. And, of course, that led to everybody saying, didn't Lincoln get shot? And it's like, you missed 3 words in there. Intentionally missed 3 words, which is he was treated worse by the press.
By the press.
Than...
And as I think you know, I'm kind of a student of the Civil War and of that period.
Of course.
Was on the board of
the
directors.
media was off. I mean, especially the Southern press, they hated Lincoln.
Of course they did. Lincoln had press that hated him as much as the press hates Trump today. But there was a big difference. About half the press did not. About half the press loved Lincoln. That's not what you have today. And I forget who, I think wasn't it Brit Hume? Somebody said exactly the right thing in response to this. The difference was the press that hated Lincoln and now hate Trump hated them equally. They did equal bad things to those 2 presidents. The difference was 95% of the media today hates Trump. Back then it was 50%, probably only 50% of the media that hated Lincoln. The other 50% did not. And the other 50% either supported him or loved him. Biased media and newspapers that were either Republican or Democrat or Federalist or Whig or whatever have existed since the beginning of the Republic. That is nothing new. What is new is how absolutely unilateral the press is today on one side. That's what's new about today, and that's what's dangerous about today.
It is monolithic. I agree. I totally agree with that. They are monolithic.
If there were as many Fox Newses as there are CBS, ABCs, and NBCs, then you wouldn't hear me bitching about this because people would get an equal vision of both sides, but they don't, and that makes the press pernicious and destructive in this environment, and so there's Todd. I had to say his name one more time.
As long as we're on media, let me give you a couple more examples, and then do you have another rant you want to do?
One more, just media, and then you can give me the examples. But I have 2 examples. So
go ahead.
So last week, some of our friends here said there's a local little restaurant, a little gastropub restaurant, and that the guy hadn't gotten his PPP money, and they were in real trouble, and that he worked his whole life to have a restaurant. He's now got it. He was afraid he's going to lose his restaurant, so sent out to all of us, let's all go there and let's all order takeout food that night. So I did. So I'm sitting there waiting for my takeout food because there actually were, quite a few people. I think there was about 35 of us that went and got there that night from this thing. But so for some reason on the TV there in the bar, empty bar, they had CNN on. And I don't ever watch CNN, but it was Anderson Cooper sitting there, and callers were calling in. It was questions from CNN viewers to Anderson Cooper and callers about the Wuhan virus. I can't believe one of them is running outside by yourself dangerous?
Right.
Is running outside by yourself dangerous? Is that because somewhere here in Arizona, someone could the air? Is that what it is? Then the second question I particularly loved was similar.
Yeah.
If the air conditioner filters in their house need to be changed, can they get the coronavirus from the Wuhan virus? Of course, they said coronavirus from the air conditioner filters, because the virus would have been trapped in the filter coming into the house, and therefore those filters would just be a cesspool of virus. This is why I know one of the things you wanted to get to today was the reopening.
Yes.
When are these people going to believe we ought to reopen? Those CNN callers. When are they going to believe we ought to reopen anything?
You see, I'm starting to believe that nobody wants to reopen because if we reopen now, the economy is going to recover in time for the election enough that it'll help Trump. And so we've got to stay shut, not because of anybody's lives, not because of anything other than if we totally tank the economy worse, then there's no chance that Trump can get reelected. That's the calculation that's being made.
There's no question that calculation is going on by some. I would like to think it's not by that many.
I would like to as well. I just don't think it is.
But the thing is, these CNN callers, these are the same people who believe that global warming, right, is going to kill us all in 6 to 10 years, which makes me wonder, why are we even worrying about the coronavirus? We're all going to be dead anyway, right? So if a few of us get killed off a little earlier before global warming kills us all off, I mean, but this is who these people are. They're just afraid all the time. And these are these CNN viewers, and they're just afraid all the time. And these people are never going to, I don't know when they're ever going to come back out. And they don't think we ought to open anything. And they just figure the government ought to just keep sending them checks and sending them food, and they'll just stay home. And let's make sure that we weren't supposed to use reusable plastic single-use plastic bags, but now we have to use single-use plastic bags.
Yeah, apparently we do now because the recyclable bags, they don't know where they came from, and they're full of COVID, so you can't recycle your bags anymore.
CNN callers, I was just there for about 5 minutes and saw this, and then I got my fish and chips and my takeout draft beer, and off I went happy. So.
Okay, so...
There we go. So what have you got, media?
This is from the Tampa Bay News. Chris Tisch, who is their breaking news editor who tweets out all their stories on Twitter, has this breaking headline. 1 day after reopening, Florida recorded a record number of new deaths Tuesday from the novel coronavirus, with 113 fatalities reported, including 11 in the Tampa Bay region. Leaving you, of course, to believe that the virus has suddenly mutated to a 1-day incubation period, and you are now fatal 100% of the time the day after you contract the virus. Because apparently, if you reopen a day later, whatever the stats are, it's because you reopened the day before, John Campbell.
Now, a bunch of these lefties, they want big reinfections in Georgia, in Tennessee,
in red states, Texas, you betcha they do.
Texas, in Florida, they want those first states. They want those reinfections.
They want that death count jacked up in red states. You betcha.
In order to prove that their blue state was right and that the red state decision was wrong. And interestingly,
Ron DeSantis, don't you?
To go up? I served with Ron DeSantis.
I think he's actually done a remarkable job thus far and has been pretty measured. Now he wants to reopen.
I have to admit to you that I did not see this in him. I liked him. He was a good guy, but I did not see this level of competence particularly as governor of, what is Florida now? Third largest state, right? California, Texas, Florida. Yeah, it's the third largest state. So I did not see that he would be this commanding a chief executive, particularly of the third largest state, when I saw him there. Like I say, I like the guy, but man, he's been great. He's been absolutely great. So you're typing.
No, I'm just fighting with people in the chat room. They're still, yeah. There's a couple. Yeah, but there's a bunch that still they'd like to focus all their screed against Chuck Todd.
Hey, chat room. I'm not on the chat room right now because I am obviously doing this, but I'm with you, folks. I'm with you. Keep giving it to Generalissimo.
Whatever.
Okay.
I don't care. Okay, so what happened over the weekend?
Stuff is absolutely damning. You take his words from Kavanaugh.
Hey, you know what?
It's prima facie evidence. Guilty.
And you know what? The thing is, That's the thing about typing it is it was a Rorschach test. You can take out of that whatever you want to take out of it. And believe me, there was plenty of stuff out there that even though it was a non-hostile interview of Chuck, there was plenty of material that came out of there that people found quite fascinating, right? I mean, there was certainly material to take out of that. So it was.
Oh yeah, there was, and there were no follow-ups. It was very non-hostile. There were no follow-ups.
Hugh doesn't do a lot of hostile interviews. He really doesn't.
No, he doesn't. No, you're right.
So,
you're